The first hunt I ever took this bird on, Matt and I were in a little college town in Valdosta, Georgia, and we went out to a little park that had a few trees in it and not very many, some squirrels running around. And so we get out, and he had a little whippet at the time. And we get out and let the hawk go, and the red tail flies up into a tree, and Matt and I kind of start unloading. I get my vest, and I'm putting it on and grabbing stuff I need. And about that time, I look up, and we hear the bells go off, and the hawk flies over to another tree, slams into a squirrel nest, and starts ripping it apart. And a squirrel ran down the tree, hit the ground. The whippet was right behind it, and the red tail flies over the whippet and catches the squirrel. And we had not taken 2 steps from the car.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? Welcome back for another week of the Falconry Told podcast, and glad you're joining us again. A couple months ago, I was talking to Matt Molnex, and just talking about different ideas for people to have on the show in the future, and he made a suggestion that Eric Edwards, a former apprentice of his, would make a good guest. So I contacted Eric, and he was nice enough to invite me down and hang out a couple days while they were trapping merlins on the panhandle there in Florida. I had never seen beach trapping before, so I was stoked to get the opportunity to go and hang out, and was able to have a conversation with Eric. So I give you all Eric Edwards. Enjoy. 3, 2, and 1. Mr. Eric Edwards, how's it going, man?
Doing good. Great to have you.
Yeah, man. Thanks so much for the invite. And we're actually hanging out down here on the Panhandle of Florida right now, looking out these fine back deck windows, staring right at the ocean and a nice beach and everything. This is a terrible place to trap, dude.
It's a horrible place to trap. It's probably the world's fanciest trapping blind. There's no doubt.
Yeah. Whenever I started talking to you about all this and everything, I had no idea. You said you were close to a beach and you did some beach trapping and stuff like that, but I didn't realize that you really actually had a house, kind of on the beach and everything.
The beach.
And
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, I remembered pulling up and just thinking, yeah, he's definitely got it rough for the week or so. Out of the year that he comes and does this each year. So you do this about every year, right?
Absolutely, yeah. This is Merlin trapping trip that a friend of mine's been trapping up in this area since the 70s, basically, and they've invited me along for about 25 years now, coming up here and trapping Merlins. And he used to organize the trip and invite friends in, and probably 10, 12 years ago, I started kind of taking over the organization of the trip and renting the houses and doing all that. But I've been, like I said, coming up here for about 25 years trapping Merlins.
Yeah, I guess there's probably a lot worse things to have to just begrudgingly take over,
yes. Right? It's not too bad. And the trip's kind of stretched from a 4-day trip to now we try to spend about 2 weeks up here trapping Merlins every day. So.
Yeah, that's, man. I like I said, man, I'm envious. I'm honestly just... this place is pretty cool for everyone that's listening. I know you can't see what we're seeing right now, but just picture this nice picturesque beach location, and literally the trapping area and everything is right in the backyard. So if you just want to go in and grab a cold frosty beverage, while you're kind of just suffering in this just terrible Florida sun and everything, staring at this wonderful oceanfront view, you can just walk right into an air-conditioned nice house in here and do that. And yeah, so since the 70s.
Yeah, they started out coming down here on an island near here, and it kind of got overdeveloped, and they kind of wandered into this area. But yeah, coming here since the 70s, trapping, starting out with peregrines, trapping peregrines and merlins, and we trap a lot of peregrines here as well when somebody has a peregrine permit, and we try to invite. We usually have anywhere from 6 to 10 people that come in and out of the house through the 2 weeks, and people that either first time they've ever been merlin trapping, or guys that have been doing it for 30 years, and just it's a pretty incredible wealth of information of merlin flyers and trappers that are here. At one point we probably had over 100 years worth of experience, sitting here one day, guys that have been doing this just forever. So it's a lot of fun. Very, very good learning experience as well.
Yeah, no, obviously. I feel like I've learned quite a bit just seeing how your Dogaza setup out there and everything was pretty cool. It's not to mention all the the nighttime hangout shenanigan aspect of things, that obviously I got a small taste of last night, which is pretty funny.
Of course, a little bit of that. We like to unwind after a long day of sitting in the sun merlin trapping.
Well, yeah, no, I mean there's a lot to have to vent and just voice your frustrations about out here. That's for sure.
And hopefully you have a lot of merlins to man all night. So.
Yeah, no, I mean that's the hope anyway. So I mean you kind of told me a little bit about kind of the average amount that you can typically see or trap or whatever. I mean, this is a major kind of flyway and stuff, but I mean, what's the best and worst year that you had out here?
The place that we're at is not the best place to trap merlins in the state of Florida. I mean, the East Coast is by far has a more consistent flyway, a more consistent flight of merlins and peregrines. And any kind of raptor. They just migrate the East Coast, but this place has a kind of hit and miss sort of an attitude to it. Some days you come out here and I've sat on the deck and spent 3 days staring at the sky and not seen a single raptor. And other days we'd come out here and catch 10, 12 birds a day. So it does seem to be a little bit of a roller coaster. This week's been kind of unusual. It's been more, I guess last week was a little more of a steady kind of a flight. We were seeing 8 to 10 merlins a day, catching 1 to 2 out of those. So it's been a little more a consistent week last week. And this week, it's just gotten brutally hot, and as you have experienced, and windy, and seems to have slowed down a little bit. But
yeah, well, I mean, it's like I said, it's if they're if you're going to meet unfavorable conditions in any kind of trapping environment, I still think that obviously this is probably the
not a bad place to do it. Yeah. But it's one of the. I mean, trapping's like anything else. It's about time put in. If you put in the time. You spend the days and the hours out there doing it, you're going to have good days, slow days, fantastic days, incredible days. And like we've witnessed out here, just seeing what happens just on the beach is just pretty incredible. You have a peregrine come by 1 minute, chasing shorebirds down the beach, and next minute we watch an osprey catch a fish and a bald eagle chase it all over the sky and end up making it drop it. So I mean, you really see a lot of cool stuff out here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, it seems like there's a lot of nice entertainment aspects of it for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, if it's just a really natural kind of an area too. I mean, it's hard to fathom, but that we're sitting on a beach in Florida and you can't see a condo.
Yeah.
The nearest grocery store is 45 minutes away.
Well, and that's the only experience that I really have with Florida beaches for the most part. Because I mean, I've been coming to Florida on vacation, off and on with my parents since I was little. Yeah, right. And I mean, it's always been in like a condo in Daytona Beach or something like that. And it's for me to come to a place and see an area like this where most of it's state park around us, and there's some houses like on a strip and everything, but there's not just an over fluctuation of tourism, just constantly walking up and down the beach and everything. It's kind of it's weird, but it's good weird.
Yeah, it's a neat area.
Yeah. So you were telling me earlier also something about not too far up from here there was a spot that used to kind of work and trap and kind of watch a bunch of birds migrate through and stuff. What area was that you were talking about, or was that, or maybe that was Matt that mentioned something to me?
Yeah, I'm not sure what that would have been. I mean, we used to. I mean, obviously, we did more trapping over on the East Coast where we saw a lot of birds.
Yeah.
But, up in this area, I've really not trapped anywhere else. Kind of in this Panhandle area. This is kind of the spot I've been at.
Gotcha.
For a long time.
Yeah, no, but pretty much like up the area, just up the road here is like more state park area, and then like. What part of this area isn't state park area? I mean, is it pretty much
just where houses are sitting?
Yeah, just everything else literally around. So, no, I mean, so you said that like back in the 70s and everything, this was a lot more open. Everything, things have been a lot more grown up. Like, which areas around here did you all used to trap that aren't accessible now?
Well, there's some islands that are farther east. I mean, you're talking an hour, over on the other area. Some places that guys used to go trap, and it's just like everything else in Florida. It's just all built up and grown up. And the same thing on the East Coast. We had areas back in the years ago when friends used to trap big fields that are now condos and shopping centers and things like that.
Same deal. So in other words, the the overdevelopment aspect of things look a lot different in Florida than they do in, say, southern Indiana.
Oh yeah. I mean, it makes trapping very difficult in Florida. Because finding a place to trap is the hardest thing about it.
Well, and I'm sure the hunting looks a lot different down here too, because I haven't really talked to too many people that that hunt in Florida and this far south and everything. So I mean, obviously in southern Indiana, I mean, we have a lot of the typical, squirrels, cottontails, all that kind of stuff. But I mean, go ahead and just describe to me then how different hunting is down here compared to other parts of the country like the Midwest and stuff.
Hunting in Florida, I mean, I've hunted all over the country, and everywhere has its own challenges, of course. I mean, hunting way up north, it gets freezing cold and you have to deal with snow. But, Florida, it's all about the heat. You have to deal with the hot weather, the heat. It's hard to motivate birds in the heat. But hunting in general in Florida, most people are hunting squirrels and rabbits like everywhere else. You got a few people that are flying Longwings on ducks. I mean, we do have good duck hunting in Florida. We have a duck that stays here year-round, mottled ducks. So you have them kind of not migrating through, but they're here all the time. And then we get, of course, a lot of your migrants, teal that come in, ringnecks, pintails, pretty much everything like that. So there are a few duck guys and a few of us Merlin falconers that fly anything from doves and snipe to sparrows and quail occasionally. And I do most of my falconry, of course, is merlins that I fly a lot of sparrows with and occasional doves and quail. We do have a couple coveys of quail in the ranches that I hunt, and wild quail. And then I fly a lot of small peregrines, tiercel peregrines, passage peregrines, barbaries, and mostly on snipe. Snipe's something that I've pursued most of the time I've been in Florida, for probably almost 20 years now.
Cool. So how's as far as the Florida regs and stuff go with the seasons and everything, how different is that? I mean, what do you guys have that's a little bit more open year round as opposed to like snipe and all that kind of stuff where I'm at obviously has some kind of tighter seasons and windows and stuff.
And it's probably the same for us. I mean, our snipe season is it starts in, I guess, middle of November or 1st of November and goes through middle of February. So we have a pretty good snipe season that goes through there, and dove season as well. Duck season, our duck season's weird. It gets kind of split up. So
ours is too.
Yeah, it starts and stops and starts and stops.
Yeah.
And so,
well, same with doves for us too. It's the same, and crows even.
Right. Get a couple little weird seasons with.
Yeah, like our crows for us, I think is like. July to mid-August, and then it stops and then starts again in like December and goes to like I don't know. Yeah. So I mean, it's so you mentioned that like there's that particular duck that you have pretty much year round here and doesn't migrate in and out or whatever. Does it follow the same migratory season and everything?
Same migratory seasons as any other duck. It's treated like all the rest of them, but it's going to be here, when the season opens. And, and that's mostly what we're flying is we're flying mottled ducks and teal are two pretty popular ducks that are flown in Florida. But and I haven't hunted ducks here in a long time. I mean, it's a difficult place to fly ducks, partially because there's so much water in Florida. Right. There's very little. There's not a lot of cattle ranches around everywhere where you have small cow ponds. So the ponds tend to be big marshes, or ditches and waterways, and just so much water in Florida. It's hard to pinpoint them down. With other forms of intimidating wildlife that tend to kind of congregate in set areas. So. It's always a bit of a roll of the dice, see if you're going to step on an alligator when you're flushing your ducks. And the biggest challenge of hunting in Florida, of course, just the heat. I mean, it really is warm most all the year. I mean, we get some periods in December, January where it's 50s, 60s, but we also, it's a very difficult place to start out. For example, a new captive bred peregrine in barbaries, which I've done many, many times, and you end up getting a bird in July, and you're out there trying to train it in August, and it's 95 degrees with 90% humidity. And it used to always make me laugh because you talk to falconers out west and talk about training peregrines and like, oh, you just take them out and you let them go and they just go up. It's like, well, they don't go up when it's 95 degrees and 90% humidity. Well, I mean, like, I've run into the same thing with the prairie over there. It's just like, they'll go up for,
I don't know, a minute, and then they'll start circling and just keep going that way.
Yeah.
And then, 2 miles down the road,
I flew a passage Tiercel Prairie Falcon here in Florida, and the problem with it is just it was really hard to motivate him for one because it was just warm all the time. Yeah. He just really didn't like to fly, and I really ended up the only way I could really get him to take much of a pitch was I just started flying him in thermals. I'd go out at 11 o'clock in the afternoon and let him go, and he would just sky out. I mean, he'd be up thousands of feet, little tiny dot, but it's really the only way to motivate him to go up is to get him into a thermal. Otherwise, he's just like hunting off telephone poles and hanging out. So it's a bit of a failed experiment, but it was fun.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's like I said, he was more of a late pulled IS and stuff. So I don't know. I'm sure like a passage bird, they've already learned all those habits of just landing on stuff and whatever.
Absolutely.
And I've tried to avoid that with him. So but at the same time, the same experience of. If I'm just an hour too late out right now, it's a difference of like a 10 to 15 degree difference plus, the whole weight issue and everything. And,
right.
and just, it's to the point now where it's like if I look at the clock and things have just gone to the point where it's just like, okay, well, it's after 11. There's been times where I've still tried it and just regretted it. It's just pointless or whatever. It's ended up being a waste of time, But yeah, so mainly merlins and peregrines and things have been what you've mostly flown. But I mean, how did you start off? I mean,
when I got into falconry, I was living in South Georgia, Waycross, Georgia, and it was just an amazing place to fly a red-tailed hawk because Waycross is kind of a little town built in the middle of a pecan orchard. So every neighborhood bordered pecan orchards, and there were giant orchards with commercial growers all over the place. And it was kind of interesting when I got into falconry. I met a falconer at a pet store, basically. Well, I met a friend of a falconer at a pet store, and he was asking if I like birds. We were playing with a parrot, and he's like, "You like birds?" I'm like, "Well, I like birds, but I've always really liked hawks and falcons." And he's like, "You got to be kidding!" He said, "The people that work next door to me are falconers," and I'm like, "Seriously?" He's like, "Yeah." So I found out who they were and got their information and called them up. And this might sound crazy, but I met a guy today that said you were a falconer. So anyway, they got me in touch with the Georgia Club, who got me in touch with a few local Georgia falconers. And first bird I got, of course, was a red-tailed hawk, like most falconers. And it was really my sponsor, Matt Mullinex. I remember when I was first getting into the sport, one of his requirements was, you need to go find 3 hunting fields, before you get your bird. Get permission on 3 places. Well, when you go to a pecan orchard and you ask a pecan farmer, "Can I hunt squirrels on your farm?" They welcome you with open arms.
Right,
So getting permission was not a problem.
Sure, you don't have more birds.
Exactly. Can you bring more? So I remember the first time I took Matt. Matt comes to my house. He's like, "So have you found any hunting fields?" I'm like, "Yeah, I got a few. I think will be nice." And he's like, "Let's go take a look." So we pull up to a pecan orchard, and there's 20 squirrels sitting around on the ground eating pecans and running around in the trees. I'm like, "Will this work?" He's like, "Yeah, I think this will be all right." And so, so interesting. My first red tail that I ended up catching, I hunted primarily squirrels, but the first hunt I ever took this bird on, Matt and I were in a little college town in Valdosta, Georgia, and we went out to a little park that had a few trees in it and not very many, and some squirrels running around. And so we get out, and he had a little whippet at the time, and we get out and let the hawk go, and the red tail flies up into a tree, and Matt and I kind of start unloading. I get my vest, and I'm putting it on and grabbing stuff I need, and about that time I look up, and we hear the bells go off, and the hawk flies over to another tree, slams into a squirrel nest, and starts ripping it apart, and a squirrel ran down the tree, hit the ground, the whippet was right behind it, and the red tail flies over the whippet and catches the squirrel. And we had not taken 2 steps from the car.
Yeah.
And that was my first head of game I ever caught with a bird of prey.
Right. So you're getting this unnaturally, just completely, totally just skewed version of how it normally works.
Yeah. Well, and what really ended up happening was I caught a red tail that had been hunting lots of squirrels. I mean, this bird knew so much about squirrel hunting. It was just
obviously if it knew to just go straight over there and start ripping up the nest.
I learned more about hunting squirrels from that bird than the bird learned from me. I can tell you that much. So we ended up catching almost 100 squirrels first year. But it's just the place. I'm in the right place, and that's what falconry is all about. If you got the right bird and you got the abundance of game, success comes pretty easy. And that's kind of how it was there. So I flew red tails for a couple of years, and my first 2 years. And then my first year as a general, I was working in Texas doing bird shows. And we weren't going to be working all winter. And so I thought, I'm in Texas, there's ducks ponds everywhere, and I'm not going to work all winter, so I'm getting a peregrine. So my first bird as a general was a peregrine falcon, a little tiercel, and so spent all winter hunting ducks with that bird, and he killed a lot of ducks and pheasants and everything else, just because I was flying him twice a day, every day. He'd kill in the morning, he'd kill in the evening. So, nice. But I was in an area where you could literally kind of get in your car and drive a little 10-mile circle and just figure out which duck slip you wanted to take that day. I mean, it was like, okay, I've got wood ducks on that pond, I've got widgeon on that pond, I got ringnecks on that pond. So you just figure out which one you wanted to go fly. And,
it's a tough dilemma.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, believe me, I'd love to be back in that situation. But so he was a phenomenal bird, and I flew him for quite a few years. But then my second year, I ended up 1995 got my first merlin, which actually came from right here, trapping with a couple of friends, and started flying her, and that's pretty much what I've done since is long wings and more long wings.
Yeah, it's tough though. Like in my area, all I hear constantly is you shouldn't even bother with the bigger long wing and this, that, and the other. Which I know there's some merit to that. I mainly got into bigger long wing because I wanted to learn how to train a bigger long wing.
Sure.
Because I'm just a long wing guy. That's what I really enjoy. I enjoy the micros too, though. I've had a lot of fun with the kestrels that I've had and stuff. And of course, Matt pointed me kind of in your direction for this and everything, but I also know you're another big Merlin guy and stuff too. So, the Merlin was obviously the next big thing I really wanted to try and do with my falconry career. Yeah. So, it's been kind of neat seeing another group of guys that are as into it. Everything has been doing it as long as you guys have. So,
yep.
So just kind of start off with how your Merlin falconry has kind of progressed over the years. Then how many did you say you've flown at this point?
I've caught game with 33 merlins now. So,
jeez.
Yeah, all passage females except for one male, and the rest of them in passage females, and hunted a little bit of everything. My first merlin, I was actually living in Amarillo, Texas. So out there in Amarillo, I was flying big flocks of blackbirds and everything from sparrows and doves and abundance of game out there, quail every now and again. But so I flew her out there in Texas. But the first merlin, what really got me into merlins was, the first one I ever saw fly was a good friend of mine, Joel Volpe, who had a little passage female merlin, and was at a Georgia falconry meet, and out there watching her just zip around. And I'd never seen a merlin fly before, and she just was tearing up the sky and zipping all over, and ends up catching a little bird, and it really had an impact on me, kind of stuck in my head forever. And then we took trips out west with the same bird, flying her out there, and just really neat watching her fly. So I kind of knew I wanted to fly a merlin at some point. And I had an opportunity to come trapping with a few friends down here in Florida, and luckily ended up getting a bird and flew it out in Amarillo, and then flew her one season, and she did okay, but obviously I made a lot of mistakes and did a lot of things wrong, and knew I could probably do better with the next one, so turned her loose at the end of the first season. And then when I moved to Florida, just abundance of small birds here is just crazy. There's lots and lots and lots of small birds, but we don't have the big flocks of blackbirds here. They're just not here. They don't exist. Starlings you see every now and again, but no flocks. You have doves, but we really don't have a lot of agricultural areas in Florida, so you don't get the huge concentrations coming in like you would in a grain field. It's more a situation where you have a little small group that comes into a pond to get water in the mornings and sits in a couple areas in the field. So you kind of know where little pockets of them are, but it's not like you have big giant flocks of doves like you would in some agricultural places. But, so when I came here, I was flying a peregrine, and he was doing okay, but it's the same one that was my first peregrine is what I brought to Florida. But for me, it was a really long drive to find ducks. I was driving an hour and a half one way just to get to an area that had ducks, and really just got tired of doing that. So I was looking for something I could do a little closer to home, and I had a bunch of little small fields I had access to. So I got another merlin, and started flying merlins, and pretty much flown one every year, at least one. I've flown 4 casts of passage females, and I've had multiple merlins some seasons. So I've flown pretty much one every season ever since moving to Florida.
Yeah, I do distinctly remember somebody talking about, you at some point successfully doing the cast flying and stuff.
Yeah.
So, I mean, going to that, it's something not very many people hear about very often.
No, it's a little different. It's a pretty exciting thing, but I one year decided I caught 2 really nice female merlins, and I just figured I'd give it a shot and see if they'd fly together. So their names were Lily and Rose. Actually, Lily and Rose are my second cast. My first cast I got, names I believe was Mickey and Mallory. So I had Mickey and Mallory, the first ones I had, and they were doing pretty well independently, catching sparrows and things. And one of them started really doing exceptionally well, and she was the calmer of the 2, and she's really laid back, and she caught a lot of birds. And came home one day, and the dreaded toe chewing thing was going on with her. She had chewed a big thing in her foot, and so I contacted everybody and anybody, and bottom line, ended up letting her go. So I never really got to fly them together very often. They never caught anything together. So a few years later, I catch 2 new passage females, and both of them were doing really well, Lily and Rose, and so they were both catching game at home, doing great. We took a hunting trip out to Amarillo, Texas, and I'm not sure if it was a NAFA meet or just a hunting trip, but we went out to Amarillo, and we had spent a few days flying, and both of them were catching birds and doing well separately. And so my buddies out there, Matt and Jimmy Walker, and Matt's like, "Well, are you going to do it? Are you going to fly them together?" And I was like, "Well, we can give it a shot. I haven't done it yet." So we were at a little farmhouse. I had a little hut, and there were lots of little sparrows all over the place, and so we turned them both loose, and for a while there, it was like, 15 minutes of just chaos and people yelling, "You got one's coming on your left, flush." And so we'd flush sparrows. "I got another one coming over the barn, and one's behind you, one's to your right." And they're just all yelling out directions and where they were, and we're flushing sparrows, and they're just zipping all over the place. And it was really just crazy. And then Lily flies up, and there's a little stand of trees that were all bare, and she flies right up into the trees and just smacks a dove off a branch. And when she hits the dove, it dives down into the cover below. And the other Merlin, Rose, she comes flying in and crashes into the cover, and Lily crashes into the cover, and you see them they jump up and hover above the cover and dive back down in. The dove was running around on the ground, evidently. And finally, one of them flushes it, and the dove takes off, breaks from cover, and both Merlins are just right on its tail. And we're all watching this just in amazement. And they're both right behind it, and the dove heads to a fence row and bails into a fence row with both Merlins behind it, and I run over and crawl in, and there they both are holding on to this dove.
Nice, nice.
So that was the first bird I ever caught with a cast of Merlins, and then brought them home and just flew them together every day. And we just basically go to a big 4,000 acre ranch and let them go, and they just fly around, and we just hike the ranch and flush birds, and they're chasing them. And it was never a cooperative thing. They never helped each other, but it was all a big competition. So because they pushed each other to really excel. Because this one didn't want the other one to catch it, and this one didn't want the other one to catch it. So they always stayed right around you, and they just flew little circles overhead and wanted to stay real close because they didn't want the other one to get the bird. And so one would catch a bird and just fly off and go wherever, go cache it or eat it, whatever, and we'd just keep hunting with the other one. Because you couldn't really stop and go deal. So you basically just had to let that one go do whatever it was going to do, and then just keep flying with this one. And, I think one of our craziest hunts, my wife and I ended up hunting the 2 of them for 4 hours, and caught, I think, 6 or 7 birds in 4 hours, and both of them took a bath in the middle of the hunt. So, one would just disappear. It's like, "Where's Lily?" "I don't know. Give her 15 minutes. She doesn't show up. We'll go look for her." And 15 minutes later, she shows up soaking wet, and they just go sit on a fence post and dry while you're hunting the other one. And
Jeez.
And then she dries off, and here comes Lily. She comes back in, and she joins in on the hunt again. And
nice. Well, I mean, where I'm at, man, that would make me a nervous wreck, just because just the overabundance of coops and stuff that we have and everything, which I'm sure was not any different where you have been at or whatever too.
My advantage is we have coops like anywhere else, but I hunt a very wide open field. I mean, it's basically 4,000 open wide acres, and it's on the edge of a lake, and so the lake is another huge big open body. So And I've always found that as long as the merlins are open ground, they see the coop, they really usually don't have a problem getting away from Cooper's hawks. And I rarely ever, I've had, I can count on one hand the number of experiences I've had with coops coming in on my merlins, and it's just almost never, just because we're out in the middle of the wide open. I think you run into more issues when you're hunting on the edge of wood lots,
sure,
smaller fields,
or in city park areas, or anything that resembles like a city park type area or whatever, where they just can't see them coming.
Yep. I mean, I've lost one merlin to a Cooper's hawk, and it was just a weird freak situation. My wife and I were out hunting a big field, and there was kind of a marsh area on the backside of it, and we walking along and flush a sparrow, and the sparrow takes off towards the marsh, and the merlin takes off towards the sparrow, and this is just a really pretty blue sky kind of day, and we're watching in binoculars, and she chases the sparrow way off and goes in after it, and we're like, okay, she caught it, didn't catch it, we'll see what happens, and about that time, my wife says, "What is that?" And she points up to the sky, and there's a Cooper's hawk in full stoop that must have been 1,000 feet up, and saw the merlin and just comes straight down out of the heavens and wham, lands right on top of her. And she did not survive. She lived when but she had gotten so much spinal cord damage from the talons in her back, and she just lost use of her legs. And so that's the only merlin I've lost to a Cooper's hawk, and really haven't had them chased very often at all.
Wow, I mean, that's pretty good odds considering how many you've flown.
Knock on wood. Yeah,
I was going to say, that's not to jinx anything, of course. But, I mean, just to put things into perspective, I mean, out of the 2 kestrels that I've flown, I've lost the first one almost to a Cooper's hawk that I've flown.
Yeah,
and it's just I mean, it's just, like I said, of course, I don't have quite as many of those type of areas that you just described that I have access to hunt.
Right.
At least not right now. I don't. So it's
my story from that point of view is more of with Barbary falcons. I mean, all of my Barbary tiercels have met a grim demise. To eagles or horned owls.
I've heard that Barbaries have much more of a I don't know how to put it, more of like a Napoleon complex when it comes to bigger birds.
Yeah.
Like they don't realize how much smaller they are.
Yeah, I think that part of it. I know the problem with one of mine anyway was that he just never saw him as a threat. I had one catch a snipe over a big marsh area, and when he caught it over the water, of course he didn't have a place to land, so he keeps flying, and as soon as he's flying over the marsh trying to go find a place to land, these 2 bald eagles come out of the woods, and I'm like, oh no. But he's flying straight towards the bald eagles, and they're flying towards him at kind of an angle, and I'm like, he doesn't even see this as a threat.
Yeah.
And I'm running and yelling and screaming, and he lands with a snipe in his feet, 2 wing beats ahead of the bald eagles, and one of them picks him up, and the other one's fighting him over it, and then 2 bald eagles are fighting over my Barbary as they're flying off into the woods, and so.
God.
So yes, all of my Barbaries have met a grim demise to horned owls or eagles, because we have a lot of eagles in Florida, and it's just a problem. It's just if you fly Longwings in Florida, big Longwings, you will lose them to eagles eventually. It just happens. There's so many, it's incredible.
Well, how many Barbaries did you say you've flown?
I guess I've flown 3 Barbaries and 1 red nape Shaheen. So.
Oh, nice. Well, I mean, how were those experiences overall compared to? Because I've not really ever seen any Barbaries flown. So.
Yeah, they're really neat. They're just for me, it was more about trying to find a bird to hunt snipe with. And I've hunted snipe with captive bred peregrines with limited success. I just never really got one going really well on snipe. And then my first Barbary I ever flew, after, I think he caught his first snipe sometime mid-December, and then just started, once he kind of figured him out, he was really good at it, so he caught, lots of snipe all through the rest of the season. And he just really, very maneuverable. They're small little birds, of course. They're 400 grams or something. A little tiercel Barbary, 350, 400 grams, and so they're zippy all over the sky. But and the other thing for me is they tend to handle the Florida heat a little bit better. So where they don't naturally go up, and they got bad reputations for wandering off, which can be true. But once you kind of rein them in, you get them dialed in. They're actually great little birds and good flyers, and they tolerate the heat a little bit better than some of the peregrines do. So I've had a lot of success, hunting game with them, but of course they all meet an eagle eventually.
Well, I mean, do you think that that whole ranging out reputation that barbaries have? I mean, do you think that's really that much better, in cooler weather, like a more traditional, falconry season, like a winter, or doesn't matter? They just naturally disposition.
Well, it's funny because, of course, you hear that about them all the time, and I heard it about them all the time. And when I got my first barbary, it was somewhat true. When I go out to try to train him, I got to the point to where I would have my lure in my hand, and I'd pull the hood off, and he'd look around and take off in a straight line, and I'm swinging my lure, and he just never look over his shoulder. Just that, could not get his attention. Same thing. I'd have a pigeon in one hand and let him go and just throw out a pigeon immediately. But he just looking that way. And the crazy thing was, most of the time he's chasing birds. He'd see. In Florida, you put a pair of binoculars and scan the sky, and you're going to see birds.
Yeah,
there's some birds flying around of some sort. So, I think 90% of the time you pull his hood off and he'd see something in the distance and he'd just take off and want to go chase it. So I'd kind of, okay, oh no, I've got the wandering barbary here going on. But so then my next barbary, I started immediately kite training it. And this is before drones, way before drones. So I'm kite training the barbary, and it gave him something to focus on.
Yeah.
So he'd stay close, he'd ring up, he'd get the lure off the kite, he'd come down, he'd do the kite, and I never had a single problem with that bird wandering. So, in my head, I'm thinking, man, I've cured this barbary thing, by using the kite. I've figured this out, man.
Yeah.
I got it going on.
I've used this age-old tradition to train my bird.
So
I've figured it out.
I've solved the barbary problem right here. So then my next barbary, I'm like, okay, yeah, I got this, And same thing, he'd see the kite and see a bird, and off he would go. So he was the worst wandering thing I'd ever had, so far. But it took months to get this crazy little thing to stop chasing and to flying 100, more like 10 miles, off in the horizon. So. So I thought I had it solved, but it just happened to be that particular barbary.
Yeah.
Well,
in my experience, my short, experience, short span of experience so far, I should say that it's been mine experience that you just, as soon as you think you got even one species figured out, they decide to prove you wrong.
Yeah, well, one thing I say about flying merlins is that, I get dumber every year because every year I think, this is how a merlin is. I get another one that does something totally different, and things that I thought were just written in stone, that I get another one that just not even remotely, And a good example of this is the last merlin I flew last year. I had her for a couple seasons, but typically merlins pretty commonly will take baths in the field, and when they get hot, they get tired. Some passage merlins never really learn to take a bath in the house or in the weathering area, so you put a bath pan out, and getting them to use it for some of them is just a pain. And there's little tricks and things we've learned how to get them bathing, but some of them just will always bathe in the field. Well, every merlin I've ever had would go take a bath in a creek or take a bath in a pond, and then they get out of the pond and they're soaking wet, and they go sit on a fence post or sit in a tree, and they want nothing to do with you. They don't want you to approach them. They're not going to come down for food. They're soaking wet. They just want to sit there and open their wings and sun, and you basically just have to sit there and wait until they dry off. So my last merlin, first time she ever took a bath in the field, we're hunting birds and hunting for 30 minutes or something, and I see her go over to where this creek is. It's a pretty commonplace for them to take a bath, and she lands in a little tree, and then she goes down into the creek, and I'm like, all right, she's taking a bath. So I hike over to where she is, and I get up on the little berm on the edge of the creek, and sure enough, I see her down the creek a little bit, and she's just going to town, man, just splashing in, having a good old bath, and she flies up into a tree. And she's soaking wet. I put binoculars on her, and I'm like, oh, God, I'm going to have to wait, 15, 20 minutes for her to dry out. So I take my hunting vest off and take everything. I put it on the ground, and I sit down. And as soon as I sat on the ground, I looked back to where she was in the tree, and she was gone. And I'm like, oh, where'd she go? And then I turn around and I see her just booking it across the field, and she's chasing a sparrow across the field, and she puts it into a bush, and I'm like, this is crazy. And I throw my vest back on, and I run out there, and up to this point, she still didn't have a name. So, and she didn't catch the sparrow, but every hunt, every day when I'd go out, she would sometimes take a bath. But as soon as she'd get out of the water, she's ready to go. I mean, you flush a bird, she's chasing it. She just never stopped hunting. I mean, even soaking wet. So we ended up naming her Siren because she seemed to be kind of the siren of the wet world there. She was a killer mermaid, my wife would call her. So.
Well, that's nice, man. It always is kind of it's disturbing at first whenever you have a bird that starts doing something that you're like, oh, well, that's new,
Right.
But then once you get used to it, it just kind of becomes, you're just like, well, on to the next one, I guess.
Oh, yeah. And even, caching's another great example of that. I mean, we all know merlins cache, and there's various opinions on, how to get them to cache. I really don't spend any effort trying to get them to cache, but every merlin I've ever flown caches to some degree or another. But there was a point after I'd flown a dozen or so merlins when, my theory was that, if they catch, that it takes some time, once their weight starts to come up. So usually when you get them in the field, their weight's kind of a little more focused. And as you bring their weight up through the season, then they start caching. And then along comes a merlin that, goes out and catches the first sparrow she's ever caught. And she flies over to a bush and caches it and then comes right back. And I'm just like, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, so much for that theory, because, I mean, she's just brand new. I mean, and that bird she cached everything. I mean, she might have eaten 2 or 3 sparrows the whole season. But, and this bird I have now, Zen, that's how she is. I mean, she caches everything. And some merlins, when it comes to caching, they'll, they have their particular way they like to cache. A lot of them will cache in. My field has a lot of palmetto bushes, so a lot of them will go over to a palmetto bush and cache it in there. And Siren, she liked to cache in palm trees. She'd go to the palm frond and she'd cache it right at the base of where the little palm fronds come out. And but the one I have now, she makes zero effort to hide a cache. I mean, she will catch a bird, walk 3 feet, drop it on the ground, and come right back.
Yeah.
I mean, it takes her 5 seconds to cache a bird. She just it doesn't even try to hide it whatsoever.
You're just like, whatever. I'll just get another one.
Yeah, right. She's like, she just hides it, and she's like, all right, come on, let's go. Let's go get another one. But it's crazy. But so again, you over a course of flying a lot of them, you kind of really figure out that they all have their own things, and they do things weird and different, and it's just. You learn more every year. It's just crazy.
Yeah, no, I agree, man. So obviously, I mean, the merlins, you've probably flown more merlins than any other species, right, at this point?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Flown a lot of merlins. Yeah.
So, I mean, I heard you, we were all kind of talking on the deck, earlier this morning and everything, and I heard you talking about, some of the experience that you had training a bunch of other, species like owls and everything, and, for shows and different stuff like that. So, obviously, I want you to tell the story that you told about the eagle owl.
My eagle owl.
The fun eagle owl story here. But first, I just, out of all the birds that you've trained, though, aside from, you saying that owls would be kind of one of your worst types of experiences, birds to train.
Not enjoyed owls much.
Which ones did you enjoy training for the show? So
I've always loved lure flying falcons, So we used to lure fly birds quite a bit, and we used to do a show in Dallas I worked for Steve Martin for 5 years, traveling and training birds and doing shows all over the world, and so we used to do a bird show at the end of the year every season in Dallas, Texas, at the Texas State Fair. Mm-hmm. And one of the funnest things I ever did was I had a male and female barbary that I'd trained to lure fly. And this is a very large theater. It's a 5,000 seat amphitheater. So we built a big kind of square deck stage, probably 10 feet by 10 feet in the middle of the audience. Mm-hmm. And I would lure fly a male and female barbary at the same time to the theme of Top Gun. So Top Gun would start playing, and next thing you know, they'd let them go from the sides of the stage. And here comes these 2 barbaries just zipping over the audience, and so you're out there, one guy, one lure, 2 barbaries, and it's just chaos. They're just flying all over. Exactly. You can envision it, I'm sure. But no, I've trained lots of cool birds. Parrots. Love working with parrots, and work with a lot of hornbills, which was kind of a little thing of mine. I'd always been fascinated with hornbills and really enjoyed working with them and training them. And so we had hornbills in quite a few of the shows. But I've trained pretty much any kind of. And I'm kind of glad that I kind of went through that in bird shows, because my falconry's been pretty narrow. I've never flown a Harris hawk for falconry, never flown an accipiter for falconry, never flown any weird stuff in falconry, any odd birds. But and I think a lot of that is due to the fact that I kind of got that out of my system training showbirds.
Right.
I've trained untold numbers of different species of eagles, everything from the smallest eagle, the little Australian little eagle, which is about the size of a red-shouldered hawk, all the way up to wedge tails, and playing lots of vultures, condors, and king vultures, and everything else. So and even shrikes. We had called a butcher bird in our show in Sydney, Australia, and he was really neat. So trained shrikes, trained pretty much everything. But so thankfully, I think I've gotten that weird bird thing out of my system, so I can kind of focus my falconry on what works for me, for sure.
Yeah, cool. So this would be a good time to segue into the to the owl. The owl story. Yes, the owl story that I heard this morning that was priceless.
Well, of course, what happens when you're sitting on a deck trapping falcons and nothing is coming through or happening? You
talk about the mishaps of life.
You start telling stories and mishaps. What was your worst footing? What was your worst this? What was your worst that? So yeah, we were talking about owls and people flying owls, and so I shared we were doing a bird show in Houston, Texas, and we had a little backstage area where we had all the birds perched out, and we had just gotten a couple of new Eurasian eagle owls. And I was working with one before the show, just kind of emptying the water, changing the mats. So I had him on my glove and walking him around, and something had happened. Somebody drops a broom or slams a door. There was a really loud noise, and I'm wearing a very thick Calum Eagle glove on my left arm, and so when the big loud sound hits, this owl just cinches down with everything it had, and still you see the little white dot here.
I do see it.
Yes. so this owl goes completely through the glove and into the palm of my hand, and it's just most excruciating pain. It's just shooting down my arm. So of course, first thing I do is I'm trying to wiggle my glove to get him to adjust his foot a little bit, and then I'm pulling on his toes, trying to get it out of my hand, and it's not budging. Nothing's moving. So I go for the Vulcan death grip and grab it by the head, and so I grab it by the head, and it's enjoying the little scratch. It doesn't budge. So I flip it upside down by the head, and I'm kind of holding it, doing a lot of things you should not do with your birds. But so anyway, my wife's running around backstage, and she worked for the show also, and I said, Diana, I said, grab a towel and just run. This eagle owl will not let go of my hand. And blood, by this point, blood's running down my arm and dripping off my elbow. And so I said, just run at it and just make noise and throw the towel in its face. So she runs up to it with a towel and she throws it at the eagle owl, and it just kind of drapes over the owl, and it doesn't budge, And we're throwing chicks and mice and quail. There's a whole deli on the floor for this owl, and it will not jump off of my hand. And by this time, my arm's kind of going numb, and I can't really hold it anymore. So I lay down on the ground, and at this point, I was supposed to do this bird show, but I'm like, guys, I'm out. I can't do the show unless you want me to do a whole show with an owl attached to my arm. And so I'm laying in the back on the turf by his perch. I'd tied him up at that point because I just couldn't hold it anymore. So my arm's laying on the ground, and they're walking by me. Everything good? I'm like, yeah, just hanging out. Yeah. So then probably after another 10 minutes, she just loosens up and hops up onto his bow perch like nothing had ever happened, completely unfazed.
Yeah, well, I'm sure you probably did something to deserve it, though, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's just no telling what the owl saw me do.
Jeez, well, yeah, I don't know, man. It's crazy, even thinking about what goes through these birds' heads half the time. It really is.
Well, when it comes to an owl, there's not much going through their heads. Not much.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, they're supposed to be the wisest, though, right?
Yes,
the wise
of course.
old
The wise old owl.
Well, I mean, just out of curiosity, then, I mean, you said there's a lot of species that you haven't really flown, being the accipiters and Harrises and stuff. I mean, if there's a species that you ideally would have the, in whatever, in your mind would be like the best prey terrain, area or whatever. I mean, what would you like to fly that, you haven't gotten to yet?
For me, one thing I learned early on in falconry, thank goodness, was that, it's not about the bird. It's really about the quarry.
Right.
So for me, like what I hunt in Florida, I fly the birds I fly because I like to hunt snipe, and I have a lot of snipe. And fortunately, we can now fly passage peregrines, which I've kind of now realized is the ultimate bird for snipe. They're just incredible. But really the quarry that I've caught only one of and would like to, if I could take a winter off and go hunt something somewhere, I'd love to hunt prairie chickens, unfortunately, that are, kind of dwindling and harder to find, and the population's dropping. But, I've caught one prairie chicken in my life with a falcon, but the experience of trying to even catch that one was pretty crazy. It was really neat, and it's just a very impressive bird. I mean, I've seen falcons take sage grouse. I've seen falcons take an untold number of ducks and pretty much anything else. But the prairie chicken really was a fascinating bird to me, and I really enjoyed hunting them. So if I was ever in an opportunity where I could just focus a season on something, I'd love to hunt prairie chickens.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's something that grouse. Israel, he gets to go out to the House of Grouse all the time with Steve and stuff and hunt, the sage grouse. That's something I still haven't gotten to see yet. I really, honestly, haven't gotten to see too many bigger longwings really hunt in person yet. And I've seen them, serve pigeons and stuff or whatever.
Right.
But I'm doing that with mine right now. But obviously that's not what you want to see them on real stuff.
Sure. Yep.
So any kind of experience that I think, whether it be prairie chickens to grouse to whatever, that's still something that I really want to start being able to get a lot more opportunities to do. So I would I'm there with you, for sure.
Right.
But yeah, man, no, thanks again so much for having me out here and everything. This has really been a very good, unique in a good way, experience and everything, just to be able to get out here and hopefully we can trap a couple more merlins for us sorry saps that haven't gotten one out here yet.
We've filled 7 or 8 permits, a couple to go, so hopefully we can pick up a few more this evening before the sun goes down here.
Yeah, fingers crossed. And if not this evening, then hopefully the first couple hours or so tomorrow morning. Absolutely. Before I have to, unfortunately, get back to the grind up north and everything.
Yes, we all have to. You're not going up north. I am. My next job's in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada. So.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, you're not driving there, are you?
Yes, no. Thankfully not. So I'd rather fly to Saskatoon than have to drive back to Indiana. So, have fun.
Yeah. No, I'm sure I won't. But I appreciate it, man. Thanks again so much.
Absolutely. Happy to do it.
All right. We'll try and go catch something here in a bit.
Let's do it.
All right. Hey everyone, hope you enjoyed this podcast with Eric Edwards, and thank you again for joining us this week. And just wanted to give a quick shout out to all the people that have been nice enough to send some donation money our way and help us in our mission to bring you the podcast on other platforms, and also just with our mission in general of bringing the stories and experiences of falconry to the world. So thank you all again, and hope to see you all again next week and talk to you all soon. Thanks a lot.